Hi, this is Chris at the Wandering Bull. Today we're going to talk about shirt construction, and the shirt I have in front of me here is a reproduction of a Crow style shirt, and this would be of that 1880s, 1890s, right up to present, and it's made of 4 brain tan deerskins, one for the front, one for the back, one for each arm, and early tailoring of these shirts, the hide was used and the legs of the animal were used, the legs hanging down, front and back. So the tail would be here, hind legs, the head would be here, cut that hide off, and there's a shoulder seam there and here. So the 4 hides are basically sewn together at this point, the shoulder, and then the sleeves are attached to the front and the back, and that is sewn. But underneath the arm is, these are ties that tie the 2 pieces together, or the front and the back of the sleeve together. And it is sewn right here at the wrist. That cuff area is sewn together, and little leather hanging down and just fringed up a little bit. So, and obviously a bullet hole from that hide. You could patch that, leave it as is. So there's hide number 1, probably a small deer hide, and not sewn underneath but tied. And same with the body of the hide of the shirt. The front and the back are attached underneath the armpit, so there's like 3 attachment points. It's not sewn, so it's left open from the wrist all the way down. Front and back have a bib applied, piece of quill work, nice antique beads, some elk teeth, quilled fringe. The beaded strips are beaded on brain tan, then applied to the shirt. So the strips that go over the shoulder, and then the ones that run down the arm. The whole ornament skin, and the top portion is wrapped where the head would be. There's the tail and those hind legs. So there's a bunch of ermine skins, the beadwork, and it's painted. I painted the shirt after it was constructed. Spin it around. And here's those legs that hang down on that shirt. The reason I have the shirt here is to show you the example of the finished product. And what we're going to talk about is, I'm taking a flannel shirt or a long sleeve shirt and theoretically just cutting it off, cutting all the seams, and then using that for the pattern that I'm going to layer on leather. I know that the shirt that I'm going to use fits me properly, it hangs nice, and then these are the details that you're going to leave on the hide, not cut off from that pattern. And so some close-ups of this shirt while it's off the mannequin and laying on the table. We can go over some construction. There's the back of the sleeve, the front of the sleeve. I have 2 ties that basically tie it underneath the arm. And then, as we talked before, that wrist section is sewn probably 5-6 inches right to the hand, and then the little bit of tabs hang down on the hand. The strips are beaded on brain tan, then applied to the shirt. You have the ermine, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, and probably the same on the back, so we're looking at like 20 ermine skins. The bib is brain tan, fringed. The quill work in there is quill wrapped fringe with that bead basically holding it all together. Gives it that, keeps that spacing nice. 2 bone elk teeth. And the same applies to the right sleeve as the left. We'll flip this guy over. So on this side, notice you don't see that beaded strip. The beaded strip theoretically would sit on the back of the sleeve. So here's the back. Those strips continue down below the shoulder blades. And here's those shoulder strips that run down the back of the arm. So when you have the shirt on, they are facing forward. And then these will, the ermine skins on the sleeves hang down the back. The sides are not sewn up. They're basically stitched. I have some brain tan lace. I got 1, 2, 3 sets of ties running down the side, and then as well underneath the arm. And I have another example of a shirt, and this guy is not finished, still in the process. White deerskin, smooth side facing out. The smooth side would have the hair follicle sticking in it, and that rough side would be against the animal. So very similar construction as the other shirt. And this one has fringe sewn into between the sleeve and the body of the shirt. A piece of leather put in place and then fringe after it was sewn up. Much easier to fringe after the fact than before. Otherwise your thread and needle gets all tangled up in that as you're trying to stitch it. So this would be the front. There's the neck. Very similar construction that we're going to do. And there's the 2 ties for under the arm. And the wrist on this is not sewn up. It's just another tie in place. So a little different. And the bottom cut on this shirt is straight across. Very tailored, very neat. Doesn't have those legs hanging down from the animal hide. So to make the pattern that we're going to use today, I have an old long sleeve shirt that fits me, and this guy has seen better times. So theoretically what I'm going to do is cut it down the sides, under the sleeves, and over the shoulders. The shirt fits me, it's a little snug. So I'm going to mark where the sleeve attaches to the body on the front and back. That way when you cut out all your leather, you know where your pieces are going to go. And you don't put the left sleeve on the right sleeve. Not that I've ever done that before. So I'm going to use a Sharpie and just put some marks. That way I'll be able to line those marks up later on. And then that seam that runs underneath the arm, I'll put a couple in there. And when you cut this out, when you go to cut it out of the leather, you want to leave a seam allowance on the shoulders so you have enough room to sew both pieces together, which is, 1/4 inch on each piece of leather. You want to leave that seam allowance so you have enough. Once you sew it together, it's still going to fit. So I have marked the body. Let me mark the back. So I have marked over the back and right onto the arms. So once I got it all cut, I know which goes where. And I'm just going to write, this will be my left, and this is my right, and left. Oh, I forgot, I want to mark that shoulder where the front of the shirt meets the back of the shirt. I want to make sure that they line up as well. So this shirt even has a little collar. When I cut my pattern out, when I take this pattern, cut out the leather, I'm not going to do the neck, do the little stand-up collar on the neck. I'll cut that right off as well. And you could use a seam ripper for this as well. Make a nice neat seam, a nice neat cut. Right up to that armpit area, then follow that seam around the shoulders. Even though this shirt has a cuff on it, I'm still going to incorporate that in the pattern, because then that cuff comes down and covers your wrist. There's one sleeve. I'm just going to cut that collar off right now and not have to worry about it. So there's the back, and you can see how it's cut for the arms. That way those arms, the sleeves will be able to attach to the back of the shirt. And there's the shoulder seams, and that cut will obviously be right across the back of your neck. And that's the front, and you see Sharpie marks to indicate where the back will meet the front, and we'll have it tied in the proper places to fit correctly. And here's that same cut for the front of the shirt around the shoulders. And with this opening here, I'll still use that for the T on the shirt, that T cut down the neck and the shoulder seams. So there's that guy there on the right. And that will be the left. So the next step is to get 4 deer hides and transfer what I've cut out here onto that leather. So I have selected 4 deer hides. I'm going to use commercially tanned smoke and color. I'm going to put the smooth side on the inside and the suede side on the outside. So the smooth side is where the hair follicles stick in, and the suede side is actually against the animal. So I'm going to have the suede side out since I'm using the commercial. When you're using brain tan, both sides are suede. So I've selected my hide. And I'm going to leave it a little longer than the shirt. And I'm going to leave the legs of the animal hanging down on each side. And so my first thing I'm going to do is trace around the shoulders, trace this out. So I've done the shoulders and the neck. I'm not going to cut this material that would be hanging on the sides. I can do that later, and I might just fringe that so I have some fringe hanging down the sides. So I'm not going to cut underneath the armpits down the sides. And so we had marked the t-shirt. Here's the marks. This is the inside of the shirt. I'm going to mark on the leather the lines that we marked on the t-shirt before we cut it up. So I can just see that pattern. Looks like I'm going to have a couple of holes in the back shoulders of the shirt. And we talked about that seam allowance, so I'm going to cut it leaving, a 1/4 inch. So now I'm going to cut out the front of the shirt. And once again, I'm going to leave the legs as long as I can so they hang down in the front. And I've selected some wide hides so I have enough circumference to cover. every deer hide you're going to have 1, 2, 3 or more holes in it. So work on the pattern around the holes. If the hole ended up somewhere on the body that you needed to deal with, you can sew a patch in, sew that hole shut. So there's a couple of different options on that as far as closing up a hole. So I'm happy with that. Once again, I'm going to leave the sides long, and there's plenty of extra on this hide to leave a lot of fringe if I wanted to fringe underneath the arms. So I'm going to leave that seam allowance in there. And with my pen, I'm going to mark where we had marked the shirt before it was cut up. So when we cut up the shirt, I wrote left and right on that. So I knew that once it was flipped over, and I'll put the right on this side and the left. So I have selected two narrow deer hides, one for each sleeve, and I don't need them very wide, so there's no sense in wasting a nice wide hide and cutting it narrow. Leather's expensive. So once again, this is going to be my left sleeve because I wrote an L on the pattern, and this is going to be on the inside against the skin. This is the inside of my pattern. And we had talked about the little dangles coming off the sleeves on the other shirt. And I'm gonna leave the sleeve long so I can, if I need to, I can trim it afterwards. And I probably want the sleeve to come down to past my wrist, and if I need to trim it after the fact, I can do that. So I'm gonna trace out my pattern. So on this shirt, I'm gonna follow the pattern that I've done on the other shirt, and that left like a piece of leather here, and then it was sewn up to the wrist. So I'm gonna do that and not cut it tight on the sides. And then I'll be sewing up about, probably 5, 6 inches underneath the wrist. So let's mark that. So there's my shirt ends here, and let's go up a whole hand length right to there. This is a good example. You can still see the shape of the animal. Here's the tail, what would be left, the 2 hind legs, that belly area, a couple of holes in there. So I'm going to utilize this area here, And need my right sleeve. Once again, I'm going to leave it a little long for the over the wrist. Here's my right sleeve, here's my left sleeve. We have marked them correctly. I got a R and an L. And we marked the R and the L on the front of the shirt, so I know that these will work. So the next step is to sew it to follow that same pattern where we cut it out all the way around. So I'm going to sew the front to the back, then I'm going to sew the sleeves to the body, front and back. So I have a Glover's needle, believe it's like a number 5 or a number 8, and single ply imitation sinew, and I have it doubled, not on the end. This is the front of the shirt. And this is the back of the shirt. This is the front of the shirt. This is the back. Here's the two shoulder seams, and my pen mark lines up, so I know that it's correct. So I'm just gonna do a whip stitch on this, and I'm gonna line up those edges, and I can trim this little bit that's off after the fact. I have both shoulder seams sewn up, haven't sewn the arms on yet. Let's see if it fits. So this is the front. Ha. So the next step is to attach the sleeves. So I have the front and the back sewn together. This is the left sleeve because I wrote L and L, and that was important when I constructed the other shirt, I did not do that. And I sewed the left sleeve onto the right sleeve and the right sleeve onto the left sleeve, and my arms were like this. So that little bit helps you in the long run, because then I had to cut it off, do all that work all over again. So that's a big help. And it's on the inside, you'll never see it. And so now to match up the lines that we used that we marked the shirt. So I have sewn the right sleeve onto the shirt and it fits. And my next step is I'm going to sew up that little bit where this narrow part underneath my wrist. And that way I want to make sure I can get my hand in and out of that. And then we'll do the same to the left sleeve. I finished sewing the sleeves to the body of the shirt, over the shoulder and around. And now I put it back on the mannequin, and I'm gonna address underneath the arm, put a couple of ties like this shirt here. So a couple of ties underneath the arm, and then ties underneath the down the sides. And this shirt I have 3 ties, and when we cut this shirt out on the table, I left all that leather on the side. So I'm going to kind of straighten it out, make a nice straight line down the front and the back. And then here's that sleeve that we're going to put those ties in through here. So if you were to attach strips to the shoulders, this would be the time that you'd want to apply those. That way you can still lay the shirt flat, you can open it up, you get your hand inside easily. And if you sew up the arm and down the side, you'll have a difficult time. So this would be that time that you want to apply these strips. You can certainly add the bib afterwards. And here's an old bib. And so I would be attaching it here and here to this part of the shirt, applying that strip in place. So first I'm going to cut off that excess. I have marks on the inside from when I laid the shirt cutout pattern on top of the leather. I have 2 marks on the inside, and I'm just going to clean that edge up. I'm going to take an awl. I got a mark here and a mark here. I'm going to poke, go to the edge. And I'm about, half inch from the side in. And I've got some scrap leather that I had from when I cut out the pattern. Had plenty of extra material. So cut lace from that. And by tying up the sides, it's an earlier style. Later they were very finely tailored and sewn up the sides. So by tying it, you can, if we expand over time, the shirt can also expand. And I tied those in a square knot. And let's go to the sleeve. Here's the top of that sleeve. So I've slid my awl through both the front and the back sleeve. That way that hole lines up perfectly. Cut my lace to a point. And now I'm going to move to the right, a ½ inch. So I've got the right side sewn up. I'm going to do the same thing on the left side, under the arm and down the side. On this shirt, I have the details on the end of the sleeve, which is this area here. We left this intentional. And this style of shirt, as it stands now, without decoration, is kind of a camp shirt, more of an everyday use shirt. Wasn't a fancy shirt like this. This is a special occasion shirt. This is for ceremony, for presentation. This is something that they would have worn on a daily basis. So I'm going to just fringe up this left side of the sleeve. So leaving it a little rough. Depends on what your final shirt's going to be like. If you want it neat and tailored, or on that rustic side, if I could use that term. So I'm just theoretically going to fringe both sides of the tab and then right up across the wrist and little tiny ½ inch long cut fringe. So this sleeve is done. I've fringed those tabs hanging down, and on the website we have a large variety of videos on beadwork, on quill work, on wrapping your ermine, the little red wool at the top. So we have the ermine skins, we have the wool, we have beads, we quill, powdered pigment paint, and there's my little test strip. And with the powdered paint mixed with water or egg whites, water and Elmer's glue, will make it permanent. You could also just apply the paint without the glue or the egg and you dry rub it on, but that paint will just continue to flake off over time, and eventually it will stop shedding paint and give you a nice finish. So really depends on your end project, but we have a variety of paint. So the deerskin shirt, we use 4 hides, It's commercially tanned. This is the suede side. This would be against the animal, and the smooth side would have the hair sticking into it, and we opted to put the suede side facing out. The brain tan, like this shirt, has no smooth side, has two rough sides because they scrape off that smooth side in the process of brain tanning, where commercially they don't need to do that. So the difference between the two leathers, we do sell plenty of commercially tanned deerskin, and we do occasionally get brain tan in. If you have any questions, go to wanderingbull.com or 1-800-430-2855. wanderingbull.com. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram. Thanks for watching.